So far this season, Geno Smith has just not played well. A lot of people look at the game against the Ravens and they go, well, look, it's not his fault. The offensive line was playing poorly. The Ravens defensive line played great. Geno didn't have any time back there. I get all of that. And actually, I agree with that as far as the Ravens game goes and as far as the sacks he was taking in that game goes. But that's still no excuse for him throwing an easy interception to Geno Stone like he did against the Ravens. So I was really happy to hear Brock and Salk, the Seattle Sports Radio, they asked Pete Carroll this question.
I can't think of, other than maybe the one time with Matt at the end of that first year, a time where you've made any sort of a quarterback change mid-season. Is that philosophical or is that happenstance? Where does that come from? I mean, a lot of it was with Russ. He was here for a lot of the time playing pretty well as the starter. But is that what does it take to make a quarterback change mid-season?
It should be obvious, It should be an obvious situation that a guy's not doing his part. And you have to declare, where the issues are. Is it with the guys up front not being consistent? Are we not doing our route stuff right? Are we not calling in the game for him? We have to call. You have to call all games for the quarterback. They're the key, and we have to make sure we're doing our part there. So there's a lot of aspects of that, and Geno shows us every day that he's got what he needs to play good football. But that doesn't say that Drew isn't either. Drew's working his tail off, and he would love to get this chance to play and help his club. But Geno's doing fine. We just need to help him around him. Obviously, when we don't protect his any better than we did yesterday, we can't run the ball. It's going to be hard, and it's going to go somewhere, and you guys are going to turn right to Geno. That's classic. This is how it goes.
And I started thinking about the fact that Pete Carroll kind of has always gone against the grain. He's never been a coach that does things in a conventional way. He's never been the coach to do things just because that's what people would like to see. He's never cared what the 12s think. He's never cared what the media thinks. He's never cared really what anybody thinks. He's just kind of always done his own thing. When Pete Carroll first got to Seattle, Matt Hasselbeck was the quarterback. Hasselbeck spent 10 seasons as the Seahawks quarterback. His last season of those 10 was under Pete Carroll. Now, Seahawks fans at the time, myself included, were not thrilled that the Seahawks didn't give Matt Hasselbeck a contract offer. They didn't offer to re-sign him, despite the fact that he had the most passing yards in franchise history. He was second to Dave Craig in record and passing touchdowns. Let's also take into account that Dave Craig had Steve Largent to throw to for most of Matt Hasselbeck's time with the Seattle. He never really had an elite receiver. Yes, he got Jerry Rice for one season at the very end of Jerry Rice's career. Other than that, Hasselbeck never really had anyone to throw to. I mean, no disrespect to Nate Burleson, Deion Branch, Corian Robinson, and other receivers that have played for the Seahawks over the years, but they just weren't quite as dominant as like Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Chad Ochocinco, Steve Smith, the other receivers that were in the league at that time. Those guys were, all those teams had an elite guy, at least one. The Seahawks didn't really have that with Hasselbeck. It was a run-first offense. It was all about Sean Alexander and the running game, and Pete Carroll eventually kind of had a similar philosophy, but he did it differently and at least gave Russell some elite guys to throw to. But anyways, getting back to my original point, Seahawks fans loved Hasselbeck, didn't want him to go. Pete Carroll didn't care. He just did whatever he wanted to do, which was to not offer Hasselbeck a contract extension. Now, you might be going, Mike, that's more on the GM, not the head coach. That's not true in the case of Seattle, because Pete Carroll, as part of him getting the job in Seattle, was that he got to be the president of football operations, which is a position above GM. So he actually outranked John Schneider from the start. And Pete Carroll made all the final decisions about who's going to be on the team, who's not going to be on the team. Maybe John worked out the financials and worked out the logistics of it, but it was always Pete's call. It was Pete's call not to give Matt Hasselbeck a contract extension, not John Schneider. Now, they might have been on the same page and they might have both wanted to do that, but ultimately it was always Pete's call. Pete also made some other decisions that weren't particularly popular at the time, but a lot of these seemed to work out, right? He traded for Marshawn Lynch, despite the fact that Lynch was in trouble with the law. He had a hit and run, and then he had 3 gun-related misdemeanors. Pete Carroll also signed Matt Flynn to what was at the time considered to be a big contract, despite him only playing in really one game for the Packers. to be fair, he did play really well in that game. He threw for 6 touchdowns and 480 passing yards, which is pretty remarkable. It actually was a Packers record for a long time. It took Rodgers a while to beat that record. But he did that. He signed Matt Flynn just to go on to draft Russell Wilson in the same draft the same year that he had Matt Flynn. That was fine and all because Seahawks fans kind of looked at it like, well, you need a backup quarterback, and Russell Wilson, he can be the backup quarterback. And then Pete went on to start Russell Wilson, even though he had just signed Matt Flynn and gave him that big deal. And then probably the most controversial player management decision Pete Carroll's made over the years, he traded Russell Wilson, the winningest quarterback in Seahawks franchise history, the quarterback that would go on to break the Hasselbeck record and break the Dave Craig records, and the quarterback that won the most. He got the team to 2 Super Bowls, contributed to getting the team to 2 Super Bowls. He won one of them, was a yard away from winning another one of them. And Pete Carroll trades him to the Broncos? At that time, it was insane. I couldn't even believe that I was reading that. What we've learned since then makes it make a lot more sense. Russell Wilson allegedly was trying to get Pete Carroll and John Schneider fired. A whole bunch of all kinds of things going on behind the scenes that make you go, okay, you had to move on. At that time, it was blockbuster that they were making this trade. As a part of that trade, Drew Lock was coming to Seattle from Denver. So presumably Drew Lock was going to be the new quarterback for the Seahawks. That's what everybody was thinking. Inside of Seattle, outside of Seattle, everyone was thinking Drew Lock's the new quarterback for the Seahawks. Geno Smith's going to back up Drew Lock. Just for us to find out that Pete Carroll, no, he said, we're going in and we're having a quarterback competition. It's up in the air. It could go either way. And then it felt like it was more of Geno's job to lose than Drew's. And ultimately, Geno won out and Pete gave the job to Geno. Another decision that was unpopular with Seahawks fans, but worked out pretty well. Geno went on to break Russell Wilson's single-season passing record for the Seahawks. Geno went on to get the Seahawks back into the playoffs. Geno Smith, probably most importantly of that season, beat Russell Wilson in week 1. It's a team game. The entire team contributed, and Geno didn't play particularly well in the second half of that game, but he did enough to win. So, we always give credit to the quarterback, so let's give Geno his credit for that one. Plus, we got a pretty killer quote out of that game.
So for the folks you said had written you off maybe, what did you say to them?
Yeah, they wrote me off. I ain't right back, though.
For that reason alone, Geno gets credit for the win. But this season, Geno's just not looking great, and Pete seems to be reluctant to move on from Geno. Now, I get it. The Seahawks did just give Geno a 3-year contract this last offseason. But if you look at the contract, it is very easy for the Seahawks to get out of it after this season. In fact, there's a potential out in the contract at the end of this season. They could spread out the remaining cap hit over the next 2 seasons. It's not that big of a deal. Drew Lock, on the other hand, was only signed to a 1-year deal. So if you think that there is any possibility whatsoever that Drew Lock could have something and could be a good quarterback, I don't know why you're not trying Drew Lock right now. I don't know why you're not plugging Drew Lock in to be the quarterback. Look, 9 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. And it's not like these interceptions are tipped balls or mistakes. Like, sure, a few of them are. Most of these are just ugly interceptions. Balls thrown straight to defenders. He's made it easy. In the Panthers game alone, there was probably like 3 balls that should have been intercepted, but his receivers just bailed him out and totally saved Geno. And there's been several throws like that throughout the year. I don't know what Geno's seeing out there, but he's starting to look more and more like the Geno that we knew from New York, both the Giants and the Jets. The guy that we saw, he didn't get a start in with the Chargers, but he did play there. Look, the guy that we saw when Russell Wilson got hurt and he had to take over, Geno Smith just isn't the future of the franchise. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a bridge quarterback. But when you have a young quarterback on the team that could be the future of the franchise, it seems foolish to me to not give that guy a chance, especially when the starter isn't playing particularly well. So I would love to see the Seahawks move on from Geno Smith to Drew Lock. I would love to see Drew Lock get some start time. He looked pretty good in the little bit of play time he got in the Giants game. At a minimum, I think the Seahawks should have some Drew Lock packages so that it takes some pressure off of Geno. You can get Drew in there and get him some play time anyways. Having said that, I don't expect that Pete Carroll is going to move on from Geno Smith. It seems like whether his quarterback is Tavares Jackson, Matt Hasselbeck, Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, whoever his quarterback is, whoever his guy is to start the season, that's his guy. He doesn't really move off of him. And Pete Carroll's own statement that it has to be clear and obvious, it's obvious to the rest of us. 9 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. I mean, the number speaks for itself. 20th in passing touchdowns, 19th in passing yards, 16th in QBR, 19th in completion percentage. Those are fine numbers for a middle of the pack team, but for where the Seahawks want to be and where they potentially could be based on a lot of factors about this team, you can't have a quarterback that ranks that low in all these categories. I would love to get your thoughts on it. Please feel free to comment below. Tell me what you think. Is Drew Lock a guy that the Seahawks should look at starting? Is Geno Smith the guy? Have the Seahawks not given Smith enough around him? I would love to get your comments. I would also love for you to like and subscribe to The Very Best Podcast. Please click the like button, click the subscribe button. There's also this like little bell button you can push that'll like give you notifications every time that I put out a video. You could do that too, whatever you feel comfortable doing. But the subscribers definitely is a super cool move because it means that every time I upload a video in your feed on YouTube, you'll start to see recommendations for whatever my new video is. And if you're not interested in the topic, you can just scroll right past and go to the next video, or I might be talking about something you're interested in. So please be sure to like and subscribe.